Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. Alzheimer's disease, subjective medical condition limitations, and your ERISA disability insurance claim. I hope that you are not disabled or a loved one is disabled as a result of Alzheimer's. It is a horrible disease, both cognitively and physically. There are three early signs of Alzheimer's disease. Now, it's a progressive neurological disorder that affects memory, thinking, and daily functioning. And what I see in my practice is that about 80% of dementia cases are caused by Alzheimer's. When I'm looking at one of these cases and trying to help a client apply for benefits, we're looking at three early signs. The first is memory loss and cognitive decline. I find that the client or their relatives are coming in saying, look, they're having frequent memory lapse, they're misplacing items, they're forgetting recently learned information, they're struggling with tasks requiring planning or coordination. And that's particularly true, for example, in my stockbroker or banker, accountant, financial planner type clients, where that memory loss and those mistakes become abundantly clear rather quickly. The second thing people will come in and comment on is that their loved one or they are having changes in their behavior, their personality, their mood swings, their irritability, their social withdrawal. The most gregarious and friendly person has become a recluse. And number three is difficulty with familiar tasks and spatial awareness. Again, this is difficulty performing basic routine tasks, confusion about time and place, difficulty getting from place to place, from the home to the grocery store, changes and challenges with visual spatial relationships, such as judging distances or even recognizing faces. All of those are early signs and should be well documented in a claim. But before you stop work and apply for benefits, the starting point is to obtain and review that disability insurance policy or plan to understand what the definition of occupation is, of disability, and the requirements for proof. What I do find often is that the medical records are not documenting these kinds of symptoms to demonstrate that the person is unable to perform their own or any occupation. And as a result, I always have to recommend neurocognitive testing to establish a baseline in functioning. It might be that the person is not yet so disabled that they can't perform their occupation, but it's coming, and we want to have the baseline proof. Now, the other problem that I will see is that people don't understand on the other end what are the policy limitations and provisions that could impact the payment of benefits. And there are several that are applicable here. One is a mental nervous policy limitation that can limit benefits to just 2 years. And that limitation comes in two forms. One is the policy provision or plan provision that says, hey, if your disability is caused by a mental nervous condition, benefits are limited to just 2 years. Then there's the other one, I call it the Monty Python wafer thin contribution. If your disability is contributed to, regardless of how small, by a mental condition, then benefits are limited to just 2 years. I'm sure you're saying to me, but Nancy, Alzheimer's is an organic brain issue, not a psychiatric condition. True, however, in disability policies or plans, there might be language that defines Alzheimer's as a psychiatric condition. And if that's the case, I do think that there are grounds and should be grounds for challenging the applicability of that policy limitation. The other policy limitation is what's called a subjective medical condition limitation. Now, many of the complaints that I just enumerated involve memory, cognitive functions, decision-making, sort of subjective in nature, unless there is objective neurocognitive testing documenting deficits in those areas of executive functioning. What's worse, of course, is that the progression of Alzheimer's is slow and it varies from person to person. It can make it challenging to prove the extent of the disability and that it really isn't a subjective medical condition limitation. We do know that in the early stages of Alzheimer's, there might not be an obvious physical manifestation, and that can make it harder to meet not only the objective proofs that your policy or plan may require, but to get around that subjective policy limitation. Again, I think that it's really crucial that your medical history is documenting the nature of those symptoms and functionality, but that there is objectives, for example, MRIs or brain scans documenting involvement in the executive functioning area, and combine that with neurocognitive testing that can document that there is an organic cause for the cognitive problems that you are or your loved one is demonstrating. So it's comprehensive medical documentation with a great history and good testing that will document the extent and nature of not only the symptoms, but the impact on functionality. If you're facing a challenge in trying to pick the right date to become disabled as a result of Alzheimer's, you really should be consulting with an experienced ERISA disability attorney who can help you understand the terms of the policy and the plan, look at those medical records, but ultimately, in advance, start thinking about how the disability carrier plan can potentially use that mental nervous policy limitation or that subjective policy limitation as a hammer to try to deny or terminate benefits. Got it? If you have any questions about this, please take the time to contact an experienced ERISA disability attorney. But in the meantime, let's take a break before we head into our last segment of this podcast episode.
Are you a professional with questions about your individual disability policy? You need the Disability Insurance Claims Survival Guide for Professionals. This book gives you a comprehensive understanding of your disability policy, with tips and to-dos that will assist you in submitting a winning disability application. This is one you don't want to miss. For the next 24 hours, we're giving away free copies of the Disability Insurance Claims Survival Guide for Professionals. Order yours today at disabilityclaimsforprofessionals.com.